Welcome everyone to episode number 6, studio visit with Raven. Have a really exciting guest today. I'm super excited to welcome DCA onto the podcast. Someone who I've really followed for a long time in this space, and I think a lot of people have, looked up to, and also, it's just, anytime you can have an artist that is in the a member of the art block set, as they call it, the day zero set, that's a pretty special moment. So DCA, thanks for joining. I know your art goes beyond and well before art blocks and all of that. So I'm glad to be on here with you and to chat. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Excited to talk about art.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
So I wanted to start out and just how did you get into art in the first place? Like, was it when you were a kid? Like, were you a teenager? Maybe just, start talking about that. Like, I'm curious. I always ask that to artists that come on.
It's a good question. Art has always been around, for me at least, just in my life. My grandfather was a painter. My grandmother was a painter. So there was paintings around the house at all times. When I was growing up, I had a sketchbook and I would doodle in it. I would draw. I would sometimes get all crazy with like shading and stuff. As a kid, like I'm about like 6 years old, up until middle school. I was just kind of secretly, quietly sketching in sketchbooks and that kind of thing. But then I realized that, I can pick up a paintbrush and start painting. And so I did that. And some of my paintings were pretty bad. And my parents still remember some of the first things I made. And they're just like, hopefully we never have to see that again. But it's just it's all a learning process. And as a kid, just growing up, I just loved art. I felt like it was my calling. It's what my grandparents did, and so I wanted to be like them. And just felt like a general attraction to this like sort of like bohemian lifestyle, with it, along with it. So I think that's kind of where it all started. I never took art classes in elementary school, high school, or middle school, anything like that. On the contrary, I studied music. I played the violin. I took architecture classes. But for some reason, I never got to do art, and I always wanted to. And I remember I would tell my mom and my dad, like I want to take an art class in high school, and they'd be like, "No, you don't want to do that. No, don't do that. No, don't take that class," right? Eventually I did sign up for a photography course and I really liked that. My brother was already doing photography. And so I kind of learned a lot from kind of watching him do it. Just, black and white film, dark room kind of stuff. And then I also got lucky in that, my grandfather, he used these like Super 8 cameras and made stop motion animations with them. So like this is probably like in the 1940s or something, but we still have those little films. And when I saw those as a kid, I always thought, wow, that is the coolest thing ever. And so I did sign up for or my parents put me in a stop motion Super 8 class.
No way.
I got to use the cameras and play with clay animation and like move it a frame and snap the picture and move it. And it was like, I just loved that kind of stuff so much.
I feel like people would be really successful if they put that class on today because, everybody's getting back into film. Like we talked, I had Pete on last week and was talking about film. And, I feel like it's a whole movement now, the Super 8 stuff and,
Oh, yeah. And you can do it with everything. Too. There's cool apps that like make it so much easier. And they do it nowadays with like all kinds of robotics. It's pretty fascinating. Even today, like people still making stop motion animation out of clay and like figurines and stuff. But
yeah,
it was a cool art form, and I loved it. I got to bond with old cameras. I got to bond with my grandfather's kind of stuff that he was into. And I got to bond with my father, who kind of, helped me develop film. And I just very very brief foray into this as a kid, right?
What kind of painting did your grandparents paint? Was it abstract? Was it realistic? What kind of paint?
So here's how it's sort of, I guess the context is, my grandfather, he lived in Mexico City, and he one day, I guess, he was not poor. He was just, middle income, maybe a little bit better off than everybody else. But he took some time to himself and left to Paris. And he didn't know anything about painting at that time. He traveled to Paris and learned to paint there, I guess, like as a street artist.
Oh, wow.
So he picked up the techniques that I guess that people were, artists were using at the time, which in particular is what's called knife painting, where you use a really flexible sort of spatula and like get thick impasto oil paint, and kind of you use it to place really interesting textures and I guess like spatula strokes on canvas, and you can get incredibly realistic with this kind of technique. But it takes a lot of practice. And so my grandfather brought that back to Mexico, and he just did that the rest of his life. And so the paintings that he made were mostly faces, just abstract human sort of forms, very like geometric, blocky, a little eerie, but in a way like very consistent in all of his work. All his work has a very consistent sort of texture in the background that almost looks algorithmic. And he actually painted like a lot. I mean, he made paintings that were, this big. He made bigger ones. And then he even had like a few commissions for very large, like wall-sized paintings in Mexico. And there's still a few people out there that have his works. A lot of his works are in the family's possession.
What was his name?
Isaac Calderon.
That's great.
Yeah.
And like, that's so cool, because it's similarly, my grandfather was an artist, and I got a lot of my creativity from, never sold any of his work though. Did a lot of commercial work and things like that, but still, influenced me, I think, greatly growing up, especially around, just having, and I think artists just have that, personality, right? I think there's something about the way artists look at the world, and to kind of look out and wonder about what's out there, what's possible, and things like that. And I think that was a great early inspiration for me. And sounds like that was a similar experience.
Yeah, very similar. And I think like another takeaway that I got from it is that, my grandfather was passed on,
Same, yeah,
probably 30 years now, but his art is still here, and his art is what we remember and what we see every day. It's part of our daily lives. His art is what communicates to me, as even today, I can look at the work and say, oh my gosh, like I kind of see it from his perspective, like seeing what maybe he was feeling or thinking, or like the quality of the brush stroke, like says something about where his hands are, how he held his spatula, what colors he chose. Like those are communications that are being passed along. And I'm not the only one influenced by it. Like everybody in my family is influenced by it.
Yeah.
Right. So like one person creating artwork is literally like creating a lasting impression on everybody in the family. So like art has this sort of like transformative power, and I think that's really special. And I always like sort of, I feel that when I see his work, and I'm sure in other families too. I mean, probably in yours as well. If your grandfather was a painter, like there's probably similar sort of things that happening with it beyond just art making. It's more of like a influence that permeates an entire family. So
definitely,
I think that's really special.
Yeah, I mean that's really powerful, and that's something that I like as an artist myself. I think of like, and I think I'll ask you about the blockchain, because I think this just encourages that even more. But like I do think of, and I think what you're alluding to is, it sounds like you do as well, of like your art almost outliving you, right? And capturing a moment in time of your life, and putting that out there. And, you look at it just like you do with your grandfather of, you're looking back and you're kind of like, you're still with him in a way, through his art. And, that's the hope that I have for my art. And, it sounds like that's, and I'm curious, after you're saying that, I didn't even think about this, but was like, how much of this went into, art blocks and, with, you and Eric starting that. And I think like, it's one of the beautiful things about on-chain art, that permanence of it, right? Like it's something maybe that gets overlooked, but, a painting on a wall, it's very easy for that to be destroyed over time or get lost over time, or get faded, or get lost track of.
Or literally just sit in a closet with no eyes on it,
Exactly.
Generations. So, yeah, I mean, like, I think a lot of what I do, and I think, I don't want to speak for Eric, but I strongly feel that Eric is also influenced by all this, because it's just part of our upbringing. But Eric was doing a lot of projection mapping in the past, and I think I remember a day where we were like in our living room, and Eric was like playing with projection mapping. We were projection mapping on my grandfather's paintings, and like, wow. if you take like a solid color and basically like project it onto the square of the painting. And this is for any painting actually, where it's like, you start to see really interesting color differences pop out in the original artwork. So we would put like these blocks of color on his paintings and like cycle through the RGB spectrum. And then his paintings would like transform, like whenever like the blues would overlap with the actual like oil paint blue, it would create these like different kind of effects, and it was really trippy. So like, I mean, this was probably like 10 years ago, and we were already playing with tech. Like, Eric's been playing with tech for a long time. I've been playing with tech for a long time. We're both just tech type of people.
Yeah. How did you get into that like side of it? Because obviously you were exposed to the art side. How did you get exposed to like the coding side and the technology side of your practice? Like, when did that start?
I mean, it depends on where you look. I've had computers since I was a child, like most of us in this space. But I was playing with 3D rendering kind of stuff back in the 90s, but very briefly, just out of curiosity and like in my bedroom. There weren't a lot of YouTube tutorials back then. There wasn't YouTube, so it was hard to learn stuff. But eventually, so like later on, I would say like when it relates to coding and the whole generative stuff that we're into, the first time I ever even heard about code or thinking about doing code or like literally typing my own was, I took a course that Eric invited me to on Arduinos. Arduinos are those little microcontrollers that people use to control, physical devices. So I took a course there. Eric invited me. He was working on a special kind of bracelet that lights up for like a Kickstarter campaign, and he invited me for some reason, and I was like, sure, I'll join you at the like intro to Arduino class. And I didn't know anything about that stuff, and I learned about the Arduino, and we put a thermistor on there and like changed the temperature and like watched the numbers go up on the screen. It was cool. And so that was like my first like if this then that kind of scenario. And then I would say like from there I started playing with LEDs and plugging in LEDs into the Arduino and playing with lights and color. And then it just kind of grew from that, like over the course of time. And it was a very slow progression because I was like operating by myself, and I learned it, and then it just flatlined for a while. And then like a few years later, I was like, oh, remember like that coding stuff? And I started learning. My skills went up. So like it's just slow going, slow starting locomotive, I guess.
Yeah, and then Yeah, and then you started doing the when did it, because you were doing the physical art and you were doing other types of art other than generative, like when did you decide that, oh wow, like I want to be doing a lot of this generative stuff, like, or like this is kind of gonna be my main medium, you know, like is this generative side of it.
So I started playing with the whole idea of generative around 2017 because, and I've mentioned this many times, but like CryptoKitties to me was just like the moment of epiphany. Like the token string, you know, a hash string is this thing that generates the traits of a cat, right? When you take two of those hash strings and breed them together, you get a whole new number, and that generates a whole new cat. That to me was like, oh my God, there's like so much to this, right?
Yeah. I feel like that's just that whole concept is like even feels advanced for like today. Like, you know, like
I know. I mean, like I would try to explain this to people that are like non-crypto and they're still just like, what in the world? You know, it's so hard to explain it. But like any random number has, you know, some kind of, I guess like potential, right?
Yeah.
But the thing about the hash string is it's not just a random number. It's like a very large random number. And it's not just unique to blockchain, obviously. You know, it's about cryptography and but even like databases use what are called like SQL databases use like unique IDs that are just randomly generated.
New IDs, yeah.
Yeah, like those kinds of things. Like it's the same idea, but back in so CryptoKitties introduced me to it, and I remember like I sat down on the couch one time at my parents' house. Eric was over, and I was like, "Yeah, there's more to this. Like we can make like creatures that are like random and like they have 3 heads." You know, like CryptoKitties felt very limited. And, and honestly, like I just think they're so damn ugly. They're just such ugly cats. Like I'm a cat person. I love cats. And cats are such beautiful, majestic creatures. Sensitive. They're like highly fine-tuned machines. And CryptoKitties are like these blunt, ugly little gremlins that are like, you know, like they're just not very cat-like. And so I always thought, you know, like I want to make one and I want to make a better cat, like a better thing. And so like back then we started playing with these ideas and I made like a little like word, like a Mad Lib generator, you know, like take words and replace them based on the token string. Just things like that. We're just playing around. And even like so I was in grad school. I started grad school in 2017 to 2020. And I brought these ideas into my practice, and most of the people at my program, unfortunately, were just not very tech savvy.
Was this an MFA or was it a different?
Yeah. Is it MFA? Yeah. But, you know, like I would show, you know, my professors like any tech stuff and like, yeah, look what computers could do. And they'd be like, well, we don't really care about what computers can do. We care about what computers can't do. And I'm like, well, I mean, they have a point, right? Like that makes sense too. But
yeah, I've had I had, when I was in school, I had some, you know, similar experiences with, you know, faculty and things like that. You know, like I just remember
it's an uphill battle.
Yeah, I remember when I was in school and just like, you know, when I was learning actually just to do coding, like, you know, and that kind of thing, like in building sites with like WordPress and stuff like that. And, you know, I was like, oh, I was like, had this idea and I was like, you know what we could do? We could organize at the school, you know, a kind of a hackathon. And I was doing hackathons on the weekend to like startup weekends and these type of events like that just were like, you know, just coming up with a business and building a prototype in like a weekend, you know.
Cool.
And like I came to the school and was like, you know, went to the computer science department and was like, hey, you know what we could do? We could have like a hackathon and like build like nonprofits like websites, you know what I mean, for free, like, and like give back and just have fun. And the computer science, I think it was like the chair of the computer science department was like, there is no way to build a you know, a reliable website in a weekend. And I was like, oh, I just did it last weekend. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
it's so funny how fast they can shoot things down.
Yeah. And I was just like, I was like, what? I was like, I literally just did it. Like, no, we're not going to build it from scratch, but we can use like WordPress or something and we can still deliver like a lot of value. It's just like, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I think he was thinking, like I was saying, we were gonna like build it in C code from like, you know, bare metal like in a weekend or something. I don't know.
I mean, you could whip up a website so fast these days. It's ridiculous.
I know, and this was maybe in 2010, but still, it still was not like you definitely could do it. Like,
well,
you still,
So it's just like it was an uphill battle there in grad school, and for them it was more like you can't. It's not like, oh, you know, like you can't do this in a week. For the art department, it's more like, but like, what does it mean? Like, what's the meaning behind it? And I'm just like,
well, I think we still. I mean, we're a long way away from communicating that value to the broader art world, right? Like, I think the people that are in, you know, crypto art, digital art, whatever you want to call it. Like, I think we are it's a very insular community of collectors and artists, I think, right now. So it's hard to see outside of it and realize that, you know, we really are a very small group of collectors and artists. And, you know, we really have the broader art collecting community still views digital art with a lot of skepticism, and you know,
they do
are yet to realize the you know, the value in the cultural you know, value, which I just argue is you know, it's obvious. Think of how much, you know, our culture has evolved into being digital. If digital art isn't contemporary art at this point, I don't know what is, you know.
Honestly, I feel like it's only digital from here on. I mean, obviously people will still make paintings, physical sculpture. Sculpture maybe is more, you know, it's rooted in physicality. But paintings are about making a picture, an image on a plane, right? And if you have better tools and techniques to do it, then you can have pictures that can change colors and move around the screens. Like, that's better, you know, like that. There's more expression. So I feel like, you know, the future is digital. In fact, like, to me, traditional painting just feels ancient already. Like, I walked into a museum and I'm like, oh my God. Like, this shit is old. Like, where's the colors? Like, here's the movement. Like, where's the, you know, like it hits you in a different way once you've been in the digital space for a while. You realize how ancient, you know, and a lot of people are still holding on to traditional painting, which is great because there's still a lot of traditional painters out there that are phenomenal yet to be expressed, right? But like, the future is digital, and kids are picking up iPads before they're picking up pencils. People are learning to code before they're learning to write. Like, there's, you know, this is like a one-way train into the future, and you know, traditional art it'll always be there, just like photography's been around. You know, photography didn't kill painting, and digital art's not killing traditional art, but you know, there's not.
Well, photography had to fight for a long time to be considered an actual art form. You know, it took a long time for photography to be viewed in a fine art lens, right? You know, similarly, I think digital art is going to have to go through that battle as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And continue to, you know, gain, you know, make that argument that, you know, the culture is imbued with digital. Digital is all around us, right? Like, to shut out digital art, you know, I think is it just doesn't make sense. But there's so much, and just like you said, like, the digital medium just allows for so much more just creativity, right? You just have so much more dimensions, and it's not, you know, it's not just 3 dimensions. There is now with the blockchain, like, I think the blockchain is a medium of itself, right? With the interaction that's all that, you know, just with like my project, like Dots, like, you know, and a lot of other projects like that other artists have done, you know, allowing collectors to, you know, like pass in certain tokens, and then that affects the outputs, or, you know, just creating almost a community as a medium. You know, there's so many, there's endless, you know, different things like that are still out there and that can be explored. And it gets me so excited, you know, of what's possible, what artists are going to do in the future with this, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, the whole space is just ripe with exploration. I mean, there's so many avenues, so many directions. In fact, too many probably, to even have like a coherent sense of direction. It's kind of like walking into the grocery store and seeing like 20 different types of toothpaste.
Yeah.
Just like, well, which one do I pick? Like, and especially because code is a technique, right? It's like the paintbrush,
Yeah.
right? Like the images you produce are, products, right? So, um, it turns out that coding can produce a whole range and variety of imagery. So, like, why stick to one particular style?
Yeah.
Right? When you can, like, you learn a new function tomorrow, your whole style changes, your whole aesthetic changes. So, like, there's all kinds of interesting new dilemmas we're faced with as artists that kind of make it challenging to navigate the space, but also make it super exciting as like an explorer. You know, I would like to think that we're pioneers. So, this is what pioneers do. We explore new avenues.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? That's a good point. Like, there's always this, which I think you were alluding to in your last comment is kind of like, developing a signature style as an artist versus kind of just doing a bunch of different things as you are, interested in things, right?
Well, I think it depends. So it can go various ways here. I think that one is you're a human being, right? And your emotions change, your thoughts change. Well, not only that, but we're bombarded with like so many different sources of information that our minds are constantly shifting gears, right? So it only makes sense for artists, humans, to change their style out of whim, right?
Yeah.
Like today I'm learning about so-and-so on YouTube. Tomorrow I'm traveling through Venice. Like my brain is literally like as varied as my artwork, right? Like your artwork should reflect your brain, so your artwork can be varied. On the contrary, though, if you want to play into like the idea of value in the eyes of like a market, which is a dominant force in the space and in any art space, it is a dominant force. And if you want to play into that and you want to secure like a position of value with your art, then you want to keep things consistent because you're building a brand.
Yeah.
You're building an idea or like a concept that people can identify immediately.
Yeah.
You're building a style, a language that people can communicate through to you or you to them through that language, that visual language. So it's like you're constantly building up this sort of like it's almost like building a brand in a way, right? So like I like it both ways. Like honestly, I personally in my own practice, I jump a lot because I feel like I'm an explorer and I get bored easily. So if I do something one day, like for example, I'll work on a project and I might spend 6 months on it and then I complete it. And then I go and I take some time to myself to learn some new algorithms and learn some new techniques. When I come back to the computer, instead of picking up where I left off, what I usually do is I look at my previous artwork and I find the part of that artwork that I like the best, personally, that I enjoyed the most. And I take that as like kind of a starting point and I, grow from that new direction. And so I don't repeat the same thing twice. I like to keep things fresh and generative in a way.
Yeah.
The next artwork is a surprise to me, just as it's a surprise to the audience. I want to be surprised by it too. And I want to be excited about the work. And if I'm doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, I lose a little bit of that excitement. And so it just keeps things fresh. And I know it's not great for like, let's say market value, but I'm not doing this for the market value.
Yeah.
I'm doing this because I'm fucking pioneering a new medium here with a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to explore as much as I can of it in my short lifetime. I want to touch as many corners of it as I can.
Yeah.
Right. So like, that's my role.
Well, also too, I think like I was just thinking when you were saying that is has that changed a little bit because of the blockchain in that kind of thing where, we have the provenance that, we can identify pretty easily, okay, this is this artist's work or not, right? Versus in the past, it's like, okay, that's a Rothko, like, if he was just doing a bunch of random stuff, it would be like really hard to know if it was a Rothko or not, or like, almost, those brands were kind of tying almost like a provenance or
Right.
this is this artist's work, right? Like, I wonder if that becomes less relevant because of the blockchain and the, that provenance that can easily be looked up, right?
Well, I mean, I think in the past it was different. Like, I think time was different back then for artists, for people in general. Like, pace of life was slow.
Yeah.
Imagine a life with no, I hate to say this, but imagine a life with no internet. And, like, it's such an awful statement. Imagine a life with no internet. How spoiled are we? Oh my God.
I know.
But back then, like in the 40s, 50s, like, you lived in isolation, like you only knew as far as like your next door neighbor's information got to you. Like, that's how, information travels. Right? Newspaper, like phone maybe, but like you really lived like a very slow pace of life, and things were quiet, I imagine, for the most part. And people had a lot of time to think, and people had different diets. There wasn't sugar and everything, like, making us go crazy. And so like, it is a different time. And so I think artists had more time to contemplate. And right now we have the same amount of time to contemplate, but we're always plugged in. Yeah. It's hard to unplug, and then when we are plugged in, it's cycling a million ideas through our mind. When we unplug, we're just spending that time like figuring out what the hell like we've all just been through, like being plugged into the internet. So like it's hard to like get to that point and to where you really have that slow life contemplative sort of mentality, and you create a body of work that's truly like deeply seated in meaning and like self-reflection. So that stuff's hard to do, and so it's it's not impossible, but it's definitely challenging in this lifestyle. So do we need to emulate like people from the past, or we live in the moment? Like, I want my work to reflect me. I want to reflect, I'm scatterbrained as hell sometimes. My work is scatterbrained, like I jump from topic to topic. So my work jumps from topic to topic. Lately, I feel like as I get older, maybe like I'm sort of narrowing down into like a more solid lane. But you got to be, I want to be authentic to myself, right? I'm not going to be authentic to market prices or anything like that. I'm going to do what comes to me in the moment, and I'm going to go with it.
Yeah. And I think that's advice that I think every artist that's been on this podcast so far has, is following the market as an artist is really bad. And if you ever try to do that, you realize that you're going to be late because they're going to move on from by the time you finished whatever is the hype, thing to go after. And, also you're not going to be proud of it yourself because you're, it's not coming from the heart. It's not coming from something that you're really passionate about yourself. So it's not going to hit the same either. So
yeah, I think those are the words. Like, it needs to come from the heart, at least for me. Not for everybody, but for me, it needs to come from the heart.
How do you, I guess, like on that front, like, how do you get, I think inspiration is kind of like I don't love that word, but I mean, like, how do you get in the zone to, like, make art like that? Like, does it just come to you? Do you have certain practices that allow you to always kind of get creative, like, those inflows? Or, like, do you have anything, like a practice that you develop?
Well, I've been doing this for a long time, put it that way. I probably spent more than like 6 years in school studying art. I studied economics before that, but once you get into like the whole routine of things, you start building discipline, and you realize like where ideas lie in your mind and in your lifestyle and in your surroundings, and you just kind of pull from there. I know that like a lot of people that are in the space are not necessarily coming from art backgrounds. Like there's
Yeah.
engineers, there's scientists, there's accountants, all dabbling in this world of art. And I think that's like the best thing in the world, because you have fresh ideas, right?
Yeah.
And then somebody like me who's an artist, who's been an artist for many years, it might seem like they come easily, right? But it's not necessarily that they come easily. It's just that it's just like, I think I've developed like a routine where, like, if I ever need inspiration, the last thing I ever do is go search for it.
Yeah.
If you search for it, you won't find anything, because it's not physical. It's not there. It comes to you when it's ready, rather than you come to it. And so the most inspirational moments I've had are when I'm sitting down, not thinking about art, not thinking about coding. And it just so happens that for me, like a lot of this stuff happens like early in the morning hours for some reason.
Yeah.
But like I let the ideas come to me. Like just I daydream about something for a minute, thinking about some friend I had in high school like a long time ago. I wonder what they're up to, and then all of a sudden it's just like boom, I get hit with this like, oh, what if like this, and what if that? Oh, this image of like a heart, or like this image of a like this node networks. Just how it happens. You can't explain it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that can be. I experience it the same way, and I think most artists I've talked to, that's what it is, right? I think like the only way to describe it is like I like Alpha Centauri Kid, like him describing it as a muse, because I think that's a great explanation, because it kind of alludes to you can't control it, right? It just comes like. It's something like
it's from the subconscious.
Yeah, and it's like it's almost psychedelic, really. I don't know what to describe it. It's like kind of it's daydreaming, right? It's like where the best ideas come from, and they kind of just
the surrealist tapped into it. And there's also this famous story of Thomas Edison, who obviously the inventor of the light bulb, right?
Yeah,
he was the inventor of many things, and so like. He knew that there was like some sort of subconscious place where ideas came from. And so a technique that he tried, and I don't know if it's necessarily the healthiest thing, but he sat in a chair with a steel ball in his hand and a metal plate on the floor. And he laid back and then let himself drift to sleep just for a moment, to enter that sort of subconscious zone where his hand would let go of the ball and drop it on the steel plate and wake him up. And immediately like take that idea that whatever he was thinking of, dreaming of at that moment, and like build around that, right? Like it's like a weird subconscious sort of mental space where like it's not rational. You can't explain it. It's just, it's like a fountain. It's the fountain, really.
Yeah. It's really amazing. And it's hard to, even talk about it, because it is something that is, it's mysterious, right? Like that's the element of it is like it just comes, and it's like it just washes over you almost, these ideas. And I think it's something that I know it doesn't even have to be a formal artist. I know entrepreneurs experience this, right? Where they get this idea, and then it consumes them, and they say, okay, like they see it comes right in their mind, of like this business idea or something like that, like. It's just something I see in, I guess it's in just creative people. And I don't know, I honestly don't know if it's something that is just genetic, or if it's learned, or maybe a combination of both. But it's definitely an experience that everyone that I've talked to that's creative or is experiences, right?
Right. So I think what it comes down to is that as an artist, you want to put yourself in a favorable position to be able to take that idea when it strikes, jot it down, and build on it. Right. So it's like the opportunity is going to come. You want to be prepared as an artist, and that preparation, I think, is what makes somebody, be able to create more than somebody that's not prepared.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think this is great, like even for people that are not artists or just in their everyday, that are trying to just be more creative, or just add creativity in whatever they do. I think that's a really, it definitely, from what I've discerned, and it sounds like you as well, is definitely this openness, right? Like it's opening yourself up to possibilities, right? And that openness then leads to letting almost like this light in, and some of those are going to hit. Some of them are just going to be horrible. Most of them are going to be horrible ideas. Yeah, and you're going to quickly say, oh, that's a horrible idea. But some of them are going to hit, and if you're open and you let yourself, maybe it's the daydreaming, maybe it's, just that aspect of it, that these are coming in and you're not closed off to them, some of them are going to hit, right? And those are the ones you'll know that, okay, this is what I have to pay attention to. This is really, and you get to know that, like for me, it's just, I get excited about it, right? You get this feeling of this rush, like that, it's good because like like there's almost an adrenaline rush that you get from it, and you're on the chase, about on a really something that really is cool to you,
Right. Like it sparks excitement. I think that's what drives me, at least to stick with a project for 6 to 7 months.
Yeah,
it's got to be exciting for me. It's got to be full of some kind of energy that keeps me like hacking away at it. So I think that's definitely special. And obviously everything we're talking about here is just one of a million different approaches to creativity. Yeah. There's obviously other ways, and whatever works for, you as an artist, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I think that may be, different people may have probably do have different approaches. Like, sounds like me and you are pretty similar in our inspiration, but it doesn't mean that someone that had a different personality or a different way of going about it is necessarily wrong. It's really like you're saying, like, find what works for you, right? And what works for your unique personality and your just everything, right? Like your lifestyle, everything. So I think everybody can be, maybe creativity is built in to some level, but I think everybody can improve their creativity. Working on it, So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I'm one of the people that say that greatness is not necessarily born. It's it's learned. Maybe it's learned at a very young age.
Creativity is unlearned. That's what I would tell you that. Like that's one of the biggest things is that kids are a lot more creative, like just across the board. Like you observe kids, you spend time with kids, like their creativity levels are high, just no matter across the board. So
and it's not uncommon to see artists tapping into that childhood sort of creativity. I mean, you see it in painters of the past and even artists today. People tapping into that childhood sort of like innocence, or a childhood sort of sense of color or of shapes,
or you're just seeing things as a kid for like everything's kind of newish, right? Like to you as well. You don't get that, and you don't. As we get older, we notice much less as well. Like everything just becomes. Like we've seen it so many times that our brain starts to like just gloss over everything, right? It just gets so in kind of in these channels of okay, we're just doing this routine, and you miss all the nuances of everyday life, and we just kind of dismiss a lot of our experience, right? And kids don't do that because like it's new, everything is like newer to them and more exciting. Right. So it's like, how do you tap into that and open yourself up to like experience, and things like that. And I don't have like, it's not that I have a way to do that, or,
hang out with kids more often. I don't know. Surround yourself with children.
Exactly. Yeah,
They'll get you sick and they'll give you a lot of creative ideas.
exactly, for sure, definitely. Like, and my kids do that, and it's great to be with them and just figure out, see their creativity and to tap into it. And you just artists, I just noticed that, talking back to like my grandfather, he was always had that childlike, he would be pulling coins out of behind my ears and like, pretending that we're being attacked by like, on the car, like while we're driving, like this type of, just that type of, and it really made me, as I get older, to really remember that, that is what, if you want to be a successful artist, you got to tap into that, right? You got to tap into that, like you said, that sublime level of things, that fun, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good stuff.
That's great. So I'd love to talk about, some of your work, and, I think I just start out with, let's talk about I know you've probably talked about many times the early days of art blocks, but would love to just pull up, your first work, Genesis, and just kind of talk about it. And, because I just think it's a super interesting to people that listen to this, for you to be on and, just, talk about this. Cause it was, as it was I was there pretty early. I wasn't there when your project launched, but early 2021 is when I started collecting art blocks, and it was completely different back then, and I think just, the trajectory of it. And as I'm sure for you, it's even crazier for you and Eric, because I know you guys were throwing around this idea for a long time. It was years. It wasn't something that was thrown together in 2020 after the pandemic. It was it was mulling around for years. So let me throw up the screen shares up now. So but so maybe just start with that. I think you've told the story many times, how many years it was going on and things like that. But when did you come up with this idea for this project? Did you have this already and you kind of came with it, or did Eric come to you and say, "Hey, can you develop a new project?" How did that work?
It was okay. So we had the very first meeting. Okay, this is the very first time I ever heard art blocks, and I think it was the first time Eric ever shared the idea with anybody. Had a meeting at a bar with myself and Pete and a guy named Matthew Weddergreen and Eric. And, he told us about this idea, and he said, I want a project that can kind of show this idea of generative art and using token hash strings to, make imagery. And so at that time, I was already coding. I was playing with processing, and I think I had very, very primitive version of Genesis, already in the works, just because I was playing with these. I don't know if you're familiar with. I guess what would you call it? Triangulation. It's probably the first project you might have ever done with code, but you take a whole bunch of points and you triangulate them each with each other, right?
Yep.
That kind of stuff. It's very entry level kind of generative or entry level kind of coding exercise. And I was playing with that, and I thought, okay, well, maybe if I take this and I expand on it, I can give something to Eric to show that this is to demonstrate this idea. Right.
Yeah.
And Eric requested it. He said, okay, well, why don't we take a project that you're working on and we'll use that to show this idea. So I was like, okay, sure. So I went home and, I don't remember how long, but a couple of days, maybe a week. And I put something together, and it was a very primitive version of Genesis. And I shared that with Eric and the team. And, they just went with it. They're like, okay, yeah, this is the direction we're talking. This is what we're talking about. Right.
Yeah.
You change the value, the hash string, and a different output appears. And it's just triangles and colors and shapes, right? But the cool thing is that it's endless. And there's infinite number of compositions of Genesis, right? The ones that we see here are just a very fractional, tiny percentage of the vast sea of possibilities that's available in a hash string. And so at that time, Eric was, programming with the blockchain already. Like he was figuring things out, and I didn't understand a lot of that stuff. So I gave him the script, and he plugged it into like an Ethereum node that was kind of sending out every single block has a token hash, a block hash, and we plugged the block hash into it. And so like every time a new block was mined on Ethereum, the artwork would automatically change. And so we would set this up, like he had a small business selling ceramic tile and stuff like that, and he had a lot of computers there. We would set it up at his office and just leave it running. And like every day, we'd walk by and you'd just see this thing that would change every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
To a whole new artwork. And it's just like this endless fountain of artworks coming out, right?
Yeah.
And that was the whole idea. Like that is the premise. It's just that, there was no way to capture one. And, we would see a really cool Genesis and we'd be like, oh man, that one's sick with like gradients and like cool shapes. And then it would flip to the next one. And this little like.
Was the idea always to have like sell individual outputs, or was the idea ever to like sell an algorithm, like, and have it, just like people would get like, a whole algorithm that then they could just like continuously do that, like display it and get all the outputs?
I mean, honestly, like the idea wasn't even to sell anything. It was just to kind of like show that like this can happen,
is possible. Yeah,
because it was wild. And
I know Dimitri did. I know Dimitri Cherniak did that. He did something like where, and I don't know what year it was, but he did something where he made a box where he sold it, and I don't know if it was what was in there, like a Raspberry Pi, or I don't know what it was, and it was like would brick itself after so many iterations, and it was like its own piece, and it had its own algorithm and stuff. But this was before, it wasn't on the blockchain or something, but you could press a button and get a new output, but then after so long, it would basically like brick itself, if you exhausted your outputs,
So all this that we're talking about was before NFTs, like before there was even like a protocol, right?
Yeah. Before like the ERC 721 or but this was after CryptoPunks, right? Like this was
after CryptoPunks, a little bit after CryptoKitties. It was more like you put a quarter in and an artwork reveals itself, and then you put another quarter in and an artwork reveals itself. It's like this incentivized mechanism. Like you don't necessarily have the graphic etched on the quarter that you get back from a machine, right?
Yeah.
Like you just put the quarter in, and then the art interacts with the blockchain, with you, etc., by just interacting with this smart contract. Yeah. So like the idea was more like, okay, we can have people like come and scan QR codes and send a micropayment to this contract, and then they can control not just this artwork, but this like illuminated sculpture outside, right?
Oh, wow, cool.
And so like they can, when they do that, like this is just a conceptual idea, is that we had like this idea, maybe there's like an illuminated sculpture that has a whole bunch of LEDs and like
still was like a jukebox or something like that,
right? Yeah. And you could like cycle back to like any particular output and like make that play by putting in your micropayment.
Yeah.
And so like if you wanted to, like, let's say this was hosted on the top of a skyscraper, right? And the whole city could see it. You could go to this smart contract and put in like your artwork or your token, and then have that particular artwork displayed on the skyscraper.
Yeah.
So like if you wanted to hog like the queue, you could like have your artwork displayed on there for like days and not let anybody else show theirs because you like put in all the quarters in or whatever. I don't know. It's just getting really weird, but that's basically like kind of like how early it was. Like there was no coin NFT protocol. So
was the idea that like your address would be the hash, like the person that sent it?
I think so
that it would be like kind of like you would have your output, and then it would display that one. And if you paid again, then it would keep displaying it because it's off of your wallet address.
Exactly. I think it was wallet based, and I'm maybe wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was wallet based. And we tested it too. I mean, we tested it with Genesis. We got together we were using Slack back then, and we got together with like a couple of people. Pete was on there, and this guy that was programming, I don't know his name, but he was doing all the coding for the smart contract. He was like I think he was in Iran. And we all got on there and was like, okay, I'm going to send a microtransaction. And I sent it, and then they all posted pictures of like what their screen looked like, and it was the same artwork that I was seeing. And so then somebody else tried it, and then all the computers were in sync. All the artworks were showing correctly, and it was functioning, right? So like that was basically the idea. But that was in 2017, right? And that was very early. And then Art Blocks kind of was always it's Eric's baby, right? So like Eric sort of like always kept this idea going and kept pushing it. He was in all the chats and was always communicating with people online. And, so he had a huge fountain of like support. But he kept this idea alive, and over time, it changed. It evolved because obviously it was just too early and things were a little clunky, and things changed, and there was new protocols or whatever, and the ideas sort of evolved. And Eric always came, every time I would see him, he would always come back to me with like new thoughts. Like, well, what if I did this? What if I did that? Like, how does this relate? And then, I was just really his like idea support, right? He would bounce ideas off me, and I would most of the time be really skeptical and be like, are you kidding me? That would never work. But I think that was like fuel for his fire, and he would go back and like do it extra. So like that's kind of how it worked. I think for 2 years, like just bouncing ideas like back and forth, not really seeing much. But then Eric was like behind the scenes, always in communications with coders that were producing these things. I think he sold a punk to pay for like the cost of the programming.
Yeah.
And then I remember like 2 weeks before Art Blocks launched, he was like, hey man, this is finally like at a point where I think it's, going to go live, and I'm going to, actually start a business around this. And, I'm just going to go for it. And I was like, just giving him whatever kind of support I would give him. And then it launched on the 27th, and it was like, a total success, I guess you could say, like, because everything was on chain. I think people were super excited, and they saw the value in like versus NFTs hosted on IPFS or whatever.
Yeah.
There was a value there, and the generative surprise of what you get. It was just like that first day was like, oh my God, like this is a whole new way to play with images and art.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that there was such a strong community because I wasn't in the Discord channels. But after it launched that day, I jumped into Discord and was like, oh my God, there's like 100 people in here like talking about my art.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. And they're all like, oh my God, I like this work. I like this piece. I like the triangles here. Oh, this one looks like a dinosaur. This one looks like a penis. This one looks like like it was just like, oh my God, this is valuably, it's very strong community. Like that is the magic. That is the magic. This whole space is the community behind it. And so it brought it to life. It brought.
Yeah, I think that can't be like overstated, because I think like what other like, people that are collecting, any of these traditional art stuff, right? Like it's just like, like there's no community like that they go on. There's no Discord that, I don't think that like Jeff Koons collectors are going on and chatting about his work. Like, I don't think that exists. I don't know. Maybe he's gonna set one up now, but yeah.
So if you can imagine, it was a very unique moment, and a lot of us were there to experience it. I think there was maybe 200 people in the Discord. The next day there was probably 400, The next day there was 1,000, you know, and it just like exponentially grew. And I remember there was like a welcome channel in the Discord, and you would just see like,
well, Lauren, was the official
seconds.
greeter, and like Lauren was, once he got there, he was like, you know, every single person that joined, like the first half of 2021, he said like welcome to.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a cool time. I think that was literally a turning point for the medium. You know, before that moment, generative art was like this unheard of thing that, you know, very few people cared about.
Yeah.
But the people that did care about it, they were passionate about it. And the whole like multi-decade history of it was almost buried at this point. You know, and I think art blocks on that very specific day is when like it just emerged, you know, like it came back to life.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as like the traditional art world is a big tree, okay? And like all these different art movements, cubism, surrealism, you know, all those kinds of things are just big branches on a tree. And sometimes they drop seeds, but seeds very rarely take hold, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the 1960s, generative art branch, computer art branch, dropped a little seed, right? And then the tree just kept on growing, you know, like with all different art movements. And that little branch just kind of, you know, faded away, but there was a seed planted. 40, 50 years later, that little seed like sprouted a root, like traveled, you know, out of the shade of the big tree. And then on that day, the art blocks launched, that root just popped up, you know?
Yeah.
It's like a new tree is growing. And that's this whole generative art movement is a whole separate tree from the traditional art tree.
Definitely.
Right. And so I like to think of it like that. And so at the start of art blocks, and obviously I say art blocks because that was probably the biggest like profile event, but obviously Autoglyphs is doing it beforehand, and they were doing on-chain generative art, CryptoPunks, you know, too. But I think it all came to light at that time because it became public. Because art blocks is not just, it didn't just bring generative art. It brought the platform that allowed everybody to create the artworks on it to express, right? So like that's when I think it really started to shine. And so like, you know, it's grown into what it is today. And I think it's got so much more to grow. Like we're still young because I still talk to people that have never heard of generative art. And then when I explain it to them, they're like, oh my God, like I love this. Like, I want to do this. I want to get involved with this.
Oh, 100%. Like it's still like, I think, you know, it's still just so hard to even collect this stuff, like with wallets and things like that. Like, you know, I think like if that gets solved, then, you know, it becomes really easy and you know, secure to collect this, and you don't need to be like a super early adopter and deal with wallets and all kinds of stuff like that. Like, I think there's just a whole huge, even bigger group of potential collectors that would just eat this up, you know, and really, you know, people, and what I think, you know, I know Eric has said this before, and I think, I don't know if you've said it, but I know you definitely would probably agree, is that like the economies of scale for generative art just allow for, you know, whole new group of people that would never collect art or never could afford to collect like fine art to actually be able to collect a unique piece of fine art from a really accomplished artist. And because of the economies of scale, like it actually is possible to do that and like have it be affordable for each output, right? Which is just amazing.
I mean, that's a facet, but I would even say that like even beyond collecting, right? Like generative art is even something that I think aligns with the way like human minds work and how we think, because we as humans, we iterate on things. We iterate on ideas, we iterate on designs, we iterate on everything pretty much. Recipes, you know, like everything that we do is an iteration of a similar sort of recipe, but maybe slightly changed. And as artists, we iterate on visual output. if you look at the history of art, take any artist, I mean, whether it's Andy Warhol or, like Picasso, he's basically iterating on the same theme, various outputs of the same theme. And even if you take a look at society as a whole over centuries, you get iteration. The icon of a Madonna and Child has been reinterpreted century after century after century. That's an iteration on a common theme. That is the way humans think. That's the way we produce. And so with generative art, we are basically tapping into something that operates in the way that our brains already operate. We can explore themes and ideas very quickly because we let the computer do the iterating part for us. And so what that means is that we have more bandwidth in our own minds to not have to worry about the iterating part, and we can focus on the expressive part. And so like beyond collecting, generative art is a movement that I think is like, it's going to be a long lasting thing because it aligns with the way we think. So it's a better tool. It's a better tool. And so if we have a better tool, more people are going to use it because it's easier to use, and it produces more variety, it produces more fruit, right? So like, I like to think of it in that sort of way. Like generative art is more than just, like the things we're seeing on the blockchain. It's more than just the art we saw in the 60s. It's more in tune with how we operate as humans. And if you look at it from that point of view, then you can adopt this sort of ideal into more things than just art. You can, every time you make a recipe, ChatGPT is basically iterating every time you ask it to make you a recipe, right? Like you change things up a little bit, and that's how we discover new things. Eventually, one of those iterations is going to be a banger, right? Yeah. And that's going to stick around for a long time. And that's how like things come into popularity.
Do you think that that's really interesting? Because that's like, I feel like that's the one thing that, historically generative art has been more friendly to that. But, as, with art blocks and, the rise of long form generative art, like of that type of thing, it's one of the some people will look at it as a negative is that, it's not focusing on the kind of those special outputs, right? And those those surprising outputs. It's to make a successful project on art blocks is it's right. About actually constraining those outputs and making them predictable, but still every output is good, right? Or is aesthetically pleasing. What do you feel about that?
Well, let's just say that during the surrealist movement, right, there was some artists that thought that surrealism should be A, and there's some artists that thought surrealism should be B, right?
Yeah.
And what does the subconscious mean to person A is different than what the subconscious means to person B. Well, to me, generative art is about letting randomness and chance come to light. For artist B, it's about, tapping into the best outputs and producing a bunch of that particular output. Like taking chance and randomness, using it to identify really good aesthetics, and then using those aesthetics separated from the chance and randomness, right?
Yeah.
So it's different for me. I think that's where we, as going back to the tree analogy, we're a growing tree, and there's a whole bunch of branches, right? And these are all the different branches that are going to grow into larger structures, right? Like that's the beauty of this sort of thing, is that we're all exploring the same medium, but so many different directions. So for me, I truly love chance and randomness. I think that's the magic of it all. And chance and randomness produces outputs that are just not perfectly aesthetically pleasing. Like, in fact, like most of them are not very attractive at all, right? What's the chance that you're gonna like get something pleasing when you just throw a whole bunch of stuff together? It happens sometimes. It does. It really does happen sometimes. But most of the time it doesn't. And but that's the beauty of it. Like that is the magic of it. That is the art for me, is the chance and randomness.
Yeah. Do you think that humans are like, we're very good at pattern matching, right? So do you think that that's part of it, is that we can take something that is random and assign meaning to it, by looking at it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have like maybe 20 different people on my Instagram account that I follow that are people that walk around the streets of New York and take pictures of trash and find meaning in the composition of the litter, right? Like there's meaning in randomness. There's that's like it's there. It's just a matter of finding it. And like even if it's not a aesthetically pleasing output, it can still have meaning and it can still connect with somebody. And one of the things I learned in art school is that the most beautiful artworks are not necessarily always the best. I mean, they are commonly regarded as works of genius, right?
Yeah.
But to make something ugly is very challenging too.
Yeah.
I mean, we had prompts in college all the time, like make the ugliest sculpture you can make the ugliest drawing you can make. And you realize immediately, I can't get this to be any uglier as much as I try. Like it's hard to get something to be ugly, right?
Yeah.
Even ugly things will find a place in your heart, like they will find a way to like become beautiful because there's silver linings and everything, right? And so in a random output that's not beautiful, it still has its beauty when you find it. And as a viewer, it's a challenge to the viewer to find beauty in something that they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother approach to art collecting and art viewing and all that kind of stuff, right?
Definitely.
So there's many approaches.
What comes the project that comes to mind right away is Incomplete Control by Tyler Hobbs. Like when I first saw that, I was like, this is ugly. I'll just be sorry, Tyler. But like, I don't know, like my visual reaction to it after Fidenza, because Fidenza was so like, pop, was just like, initially my reaction was just, I had a visceral reaction. Like, what? Like, but then after I've spent so much time, it's become like one of my favorite collections. Because
that's what I was about to say. It's dangerous because when you see something ugly that you learn to appreciate, it quickly becomes like one of the most beautiful things to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I felt that way with the Ringers.
Yeah.
The first time I saw Ringers, I was like, oh, whoop-de-doo, some graphic design. Whoa, cool, And then over time, I was like, wait a minute, there's more to this. Like these are old. These are, impactful. These are identifiable. You could see a Ringer from like a mile away and be like, that's a Ringer.
Yeah.
And over time, that's my benchmark for like everything, like, holy shit, Ringers is the best project. It is the most, I don't know. It is my favorite project,
Yeah.
And I don't even have any Ringers, but still it is just, it's just such a good, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's simple.
It's simple, but it's still like, it's tough to do that in generative art, of like having something simple, but also have enough permutations that you're not going to have a duplication and things feel unique, which I completely agree with you. Like, it's so simple, yet it has like so much variation, but still has a consistent, like, it's just, I agree. I think it's
great.
And that's the thing. Like, I think Fidenza is great too. And it has but Fidenza has much more opportunity it has much more in it, right? Like, to have, variation, right? Where Ringers is just simple. It's much more condensed, so it's like harder to drive uniqueness, right? And that feeling of not duplicating things with a much more simple concept. So I agree. But yeah, so let's focus back out to your work a little bit. Like, what do you have coming up? I know that, like, we could go into all your projects, but everybody check out Daniel's work, on Art Blocks and all the other platforms. I mean, Bright Moments. I want to talk about Bright Moments because I know that you've done a couple projects for them now with Mexico City, you know, that project was amazing. And now you're going to be, you know, we're putting art right now, you know, people are in Venice. You're not in Venice, right? I think
No.
yeah, I was like, it'd be pretty late. And also like, you know, I don't think you'd be taking this call from Venice. I hope you wouldn't be skipping out on, Venice nightlife for me.
Oh man,
So,
I'm so jealous of not being there, man. And I've seen all these awesome posts. Like I've seen maybe like 6 posts on Twitter of like people arriving to Venice and then taking like a gondola ride like through the canals like to their destination. I'm like, fuck, damn it! Like I should have been there. I just needed to be there. That should have been me on the gondola. But it's okay. Like you know, you gotta live. I live through Twitter now too. You know,
exactly.
I mean, honestly, like I experience it almost the same as, you know, through Twitter, because you get to see everybody, see the excitement.
Probably better, to be honest. Like you miss all the bad stuff, you know, if you're just looking at Twitter.
Yeah. So no, I have a project with them coming up. So there's going to be 1,000 mints. Hopefully, it's a project with 70 different artists. So we're sort of expecting maybe like each artist is going to have about 7 outputs of the 1,000. Somebody out there is going to get to mint my work, and I think I'm really excited about it.
It's a cool concept. Like it also like it's all on chain. So like all these scripts were uploaded to, so it's basically going to pick one at random and
it is a massive script. I mean, I mean, imagine like in the art blog's contract, 70 different tabs of script, right? And each one is 25 kilobytes or less, and it's sort of like a big roulette ball, which one gets picked. And I mean, how cool is that? Like,
that's really cool.
You know? So I'm super lucky to be in that, and just everything Bright Moments has done has been just some of my. To me, like Bright Moments is the most badass thing that's come out of this space.
What's cool about that concept too is that, like, you know, I mean, what's the chance that one doesn't get minted at all? Like, it's got to be not trivial. It could happen for sure.
There's a possibility, but there's some calculations going on behind the scenes, and I know Peter Pasma has been crunching numbers, and according to him, it's very unlikely that they're not minted. So I think we're safe.
Yeah, exactly. You're outside a couple standard deviations at least. So
So I mean, I've got Bright Moments, the Bright Moments project coming up, which I'm excited about. It should be happening tomorrow or day after. And then after that, I'm kind of I'm just playing with my own stuff, you know. Just like one of the things I do is I just love like looking up algorithms and like finding ways to incorporate them into my work. So, you know, right now I'm working with a couple of different things like the slicing algorithm, but just other things too, plotting, always figuring out creative ways to use circle packing, diffusion, limited aggregation is a new one that I've been kind of playing with. Just like concepts of, you know, just random algorithmic sort of stuff. And I just love math. Like I love the math of it. I'm not like very good at math. Like my levels, I don't do calculus. It's just all algebra, right? If it's algebra and like balancing equations, okay, I can do that. But if it's calculus, like it's beyond me. So everything I do is just basically like, I look up these algorithms, I find papers written on them, I try to decipher them and write them myself. In a way that I can use them. And then it's just like constantly, every day is like a new day of exploration, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's something that like me, I'm evolving my practice to do more of that, because just historically I've just like, you know, just done with whatever I got. Right. And just be like, okay, like, you know, I wouldn't look up any algorithms or do any research or anything. I just kind of like jump in and just be like, what can I make? Like, I'll just discover an algorithm or something like, you know, but, which has been fun. But I think in order to level it up and to really go for it, you have to get I think it's helpful to know some of these classic algorithms and what their use cases can be, right? It's just like another tool that then can lead to inspiration, right?
Right. I mean, if you look at it from this perspective, is the people that have been writing these algorithms, most of them are not artists, right? They're scientists or engineers that are using them for some kind of process. Maybe they're like, even, who knows, using it for something machine related.
Yeah.
So like, as artists, like, we can pick up these artifacts that they've created, and we can say, I can express through this, or we can express through this. We can say new things through these algorithms.
Yeah.
And I think there's magic there, because we're not using them for their intended purpose, but I mean, maybe we are, I don't know, but there's so much to explore, because not a lot of people have been doing this, So like, you can pick up a fresh algorithm from somebody that wrote it 20, 30 years ago and do something with it that's nobody has ever done. And you can't do that necessarily with traditional art. You pick up a pencil and almost everything has been made with a pencil. Everything's been explored.
Every technique, you can't make up a technique with a pencil. Or maybe it's not going to be,
right.
I don't know, maybe you can, but it's like, then it's probably not like the medium of drawing.
Right. So as algorithmic artists, our our advantages and our differences come from the algorithms that we incorporate into our practice, into our language. And so I try to get a lot of that, so that I can get more going. I can get more ideas out and more thoughts, into a form. So I recommend that to any algorithmic artists out there, like, focus on algorithms.
Yeah. I tell you, that's like, I've been a software engineer for a long time, and I'll tell you, like, generative art has made me like so much better of a engineer. Like, it really pushes you, like, just programming in general, like, just, I don't know, like, it just is like, I never expected it to. I always just was like, jumped into it and was like, oh, this is cool, I'll make stuff. But like, I was so amazed, and I still am amazed how much I'm challenged on like the engineering and programming side, more so than I ever have been, like, building applications. You know what I mean? Like some of this stuff makes building applications like so easy. It's like,
Well, Ravens are known for problem solving skills. So, you got some good problem solving skills.
Yeah,
that's what this is doing. It's improving our skills in problem solving. Like, we're dealing, like, I imagine that this applies to you too, but any type of generative art algorithm that you're writing, there's probably at least 10 different variables, maybe 20, maybe 50, and they're all changing at different times.
Yeah.
And we're learning to manage this thing with, like, imagine like opening up the back of the space shuttle, and you're seeing a million different cables and trying to figure out what they are. Like, that's what we're doing on a daily basis, like managing all these different connections in the script. So like, when I'm done coding, and this is something I'm brand new at, but I'm starting to cook and make food for myself.
Awesome.
When I open up a recipe, I'm like, I just laugh, I'm just like, oh my God, there's only like 2 variables here. Like, oh, this is so fucking easy. I can't believe how easy this is to cook. Shit, I could all this time. Because because we're in these algorithms, like, managing so many variables and like connections and stuff.
Yeah, but I think a chef will tell you that it's not necessarily like,
it's not
about
it's
tasting
not even about
it
the recipe.
and like, yeah, exactly. It's the same thing with musician, which you like. I was talking to my friend who's a really good composer and like classical composer and things like that, and I was like, I just was saying, like, I forget what I was talking about how, like, like, I was basically saying, like a performer, I was like, like I was kind of insinuating that they're not like as much of an artist as a composer is, because like they're just like looking at sheet music and, performing it, and they have to just be like technically like, and he was like, no, like they have so much that they have to do, even following those instructions, that is creative, is the way they perform those instructions, right? And there's so much play in that. So I was like, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying cooking is truly easy, because obviously I still suck at it. But just like, things become different once you've spent days or hours on end, like, inside of this complex structure of problem solving. You get out in the real world, and problems, like, sometimes they just feel a little easier. You're just like, wow, like I'm really pushing my mind in a way that like is beneficial. Like I'm thinking like a computer these days, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
All right, Daniel. Well, we're at time, and it was great chatting with you and having you on the podcast. And let's do it again sometime because this was great. It went by really quickly.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. And everyone, go check out your work, and we'll be looking out at the Minter for some outputs. Cool. What's the name of the collection?
Well, the collection is actually called
The Finale. But did you have or is that going to be revealed?
It'll be revealed.
Okay, cool.
It's not really about the titles of the work. It's more about just kind of participating.
Everything just is the finale, and then awesome.
Yeah, and there's little individual like bits and pieces that you can get.
Cool. Well, looking forward to seeing the outputs.
Cool.
Everyone, go check that out. All right.
Thanks,
Daniel.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.